we on? Let's go. Welcome to another episode of the OoruLabs podcast from Bangalore. Ever complain how bad our cities are, how bad your commute is? You'll get to hear from people who are working to solve these problems in their own way. This is your weekly soapbox for urban sustainability, so do not forget to like, subscribe, and share these videos. Check out the entire podcast library and profiles of the guests on the website podcast.oorulabs.com. I am Satya Shankaran, and in this episode, Uday Kumar PL walks us through how the contemporary city was before you knew it, all documented on stones. These inscription stones can help enrich our understanding of how cities evolved. These stones tell us everything from governance, language, finance, science to astronomy. Here to demystify all this is Udaya. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Satya.
Let's start with this question. What are inscription stones really?
Inscription stones, and as the two terms himself indicate, there's something that's inscribed on a stone, basically writing on a stone. Like today, when something significant happens in our lives, for example, we build a house, or we build a dam, or we build something significant, then we write it on a stone that this building was constructed by so and so on such and such a day and was inaugurated by some person and all of that, right? So that's a permanent record or a lasting record of a message that we want to live for future generations or for people in the future. So this practice of writing on stone has been around for thousands of years. And anytime a village was built, a lake was built, a temple was built, or a hero, a martyr died in battle for a public cause, could be an attack on his village, could be a thieving party on how to steal women or something like that. They would write it on stone and put it up in a very public place. Typically places like in a temple or in front of a temple, at the village gate, under the people tree there, or places like this which were prominent, very visible, and were safe for something like that. So these essentially are the way we know what has happened in the past. All that we know as, or most of what we know as history, is essentially information that has been gathered from such writings on stones. Okay, all that we read in our history books today is essentially information, or mostly information, that has been gathered from writings on stones like this. Stuff that goes back in time. The older the history that you're looking into, the source of information is often and only inscription stones, because nothing else lasts as long as that, in a way which it was when it was written. Because when any oral messages or written documents, etc., when they're recopied or they're modified or adapted and all that, they happen to change. But when you write it on a stone and leave it in a public place, it's usually not tampered with, and it stays in the exact same place with the same content for the world to see for all time to come. So all that we know as history is essentially coming from information, or rather, not all, I would say most of information that we know as history today is essentially coming from these writings on stones.
Yeah. Who were these people really? What kind of people were they? You talked about people who are building things, who are maybe making donations, who are waging a war generally, or just fighting other people, Are these just rulers? What kind of people write on these stones? It's kind of like the Facebook of that era, right? I mean, who would these be?
All kinds of people essentially wrote on these stones. Mm-hmm. A lot of messages from the kings, obviously, were on the stones. Many messages from merchants, traders. Essentially, when donations were made to a temple, and the merchant community was a rich community and often made donations to temples, right? So they would write it on stone. And again, when I say donation, the nature of the donation is a little different from today. They were perpetual, all-time donations. So they would say, I'm donating these lands for use of the temple, and that donation is forever, which is why they would write on the stone, right? And then obviously, the people who die, martyrs, typically these are not people who are from, say, the army or essentially those kind of backgrounds. Ordinary people when they save when they fight an attack on the village or this one. An attack can happen at all times, right? There's not always an army standing by to fight off an enemy attack. So let's say a civilian or ordinary citizen takes on the enemy and then fights and dies in the battle. Then a stone is put up in his memory with writing on it. So it's usually put up by his brothers or his family and people like that. So it's ordinary people who have put up these stones as well, or it could be officials essentially a local administration official. It could be anyone. It could be even a tax collector, for example, or it could be a local chief, or it could be a local army chief. All of them have something written on stones and put up everywhere. So the messages that we are receiving are not just from one particular community, which is not just the political class. It could be anybody. It could be the political people. It could be merchants, traders. It could be farmers. It could be potters. It could be carpenters. It could be anybody. And we have many of these everywhere, all over the subcontinent. They are all over. They're in cities. They're in villages. They're in fields. They're in lakes. They're everywhere.
Before I go around asking your journey of discovery and where all you have found these things, I wanted to ask you, you said that the history is written by pre-recorded history, is written by reading these stones.
Right.
Have people put history correctly? Have they read all the stones? Or are there lots of stones you're discovering that have not been read? And do they change the trajectory of what you currently know as history? Where does that stand?
Right. So inscriptions are a problem of plenty. Okay. You have thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of them everywhere. And they give very local or hyper-local information. For example, it will say, this temple in, say, Rajajinagar was built in 1438 by someone. And the next stone would say, 200 or 300 years later, would say, this lake in Rajajinagar was built by someone else. So there's like kind of pieces of information coming from different stones, and they are very relevant only to that small set of people. Right. So typically what historians do is they kind of summarize that information in any way they want. For example, if a historian's focus is, let's say, the political history of a place, so most inscription stones also carry information about who was the ruler at that time. Even if it is not directly relevant to the contents of the inscription, it is kind of customary to say during the time ABC was ruling, this is what has happened. Okay, so if you're interested in political history, then a good source of information is inscriptions. But I'm not interested in really writing down which this temple was built here, this lake was built here, this man died here, etc. But what I do is I extract pieces of political history, which is, every mention of this man, this was the king at that time, and this was the capital at that time. I gather from hundreds or thousands of these, and then I summarize and say, this king ruled this kingdom, which spanned from, Andhra Pradesh to Kerala or whatever, and all of that. So it's an extraction and a summarization of information that you typically see as history. Our history books are, I would really say, 10,000 or 100,000 foot views. They're not really very local in a sense. And most history books, again, focus on political history. So rarely would you find a history book telling you that, the lakes of Bangalore were built by ABCD in these places, or these temples were constructed, or these are the heroes who gave their lives in the city of Bangalore and things like that. Most of the summarization would be in dynasty terms, or in terms of the name of the kings and things like that. Is the information completely given in history books? No. Is just an angle or just a window to that information which is being given to the public? Yes. Is it being correctly read? A lot of it is not as well. Mm-hmm. All of these are actually correct.
This is leading me down a rabbit hole of questions because I really want to get back to why you started this. But here's where we go. Is it being correctly read? Is the interpretations right? How do you verify these kind of interpretations? Let's start with that. I want to go back to this hyperlocal thing. But why did you say that it may not be correctly read or it is not correctly read in the history book? Of course, history is the abstraction, and when you go hyperlocal, you start piecing these things together. Where do
Right.
you find these discrepancies? Are there examples?
So, when every time you abstract and you summarize, you're leaving out a lot of details, right? And when you abstract and summarize, it's your perspective to what is important or significant. So when you don't also say what has been left out, you kind of tend to live the impression with people that whatever I'm telling is all there is to history. For example, if I were to take the story of Bangalore or Bangalore, there are about 175 inscription stones which have been documented in the city.
Mm.
Okay, and they're in every nook and corner of the city. North, east, west, south, center, everywhere. They're everywhere. And they in these inscriptions, you find the names of those places as well mentioned. Okay, so they would say in Bangalore here, okay, or let's say in Jaksandra here, or in Jalalli here, or in Hebbal here, or in Malleshwaram here, or in Saraki there, or somewhere, all of those kind of things, right? Rarely would anyone ever tell you the story of Bangalore city as the story of its localities. The narration is always usually that there was Hyder Ali, there was Tipu Sultan, there were the Wadiyars, there were there was Kempe Gowda and ABC and all of those kind of things. This is not the story of the place. Because the story of the place is what are the places that existed for long? Those places could be villages, it could be temples, it could be lakes. Okay, and who are the people who lived here? What kind of people lived here? What were the professions? What were the pains and what were the joys that they this one? All of this is the story of city of Bangalore. But there's no book in this at the moment with the city of Bangalore is narrated. The story of Bangalore is narrated in this fashion. We typically start with ABCD founded the city, then somebody added a few things, and then some other people added a few localities and whatever and all that. And almost all of this is ultra recent. Now, the place that the places that we are all very familiar with, the oldest locality in Bengaluru, interestingly, is also one of the worst or the most infamous places in the city, which is the Silk Board region. Okay, from Silk Board Junction, about 3 kilometers from Silk Board Junction, is a place called Begur. Okay, and Begur is mentioned in an inscription from 517 Common Era, which is 1500 years ago, by the same name. Okay, now have you ever heard this kind of thing? Do you know which is the oldest locality of Bangalore? That's probably what we should be teaching our children, that, look, your localities are this old. These are the things that have happened in this place. These are the people who have played a significant part in the development of this locality or this place or whatever and all of that. So when I say reading, reading is also about picking out nuggets of information like this, which are absolutely relevant as well. That's one part of the reading. The second, when I say reading, is that when it's written on stone, typically the stone wears away with time, and these have been standing there in open air for hundreds of years, right, or thousands of years in many cases. So the writing is not very clear, and it's easy to make mistakes. You think that you're seeing a certain character there, but it's not really that. A portion of it is chipped off and stuff like that. And very interestingly, the last time a huge effort at reading these inscriptions was in 1905. So it's more than 100 years since people have actually gone and read directly what's written on the stone. Over 100 years, a lot of things have improved and changed. One is obviously our knowledge of script and writing. We now have the experience. In 1905, only a few people were doing this job, and they had only so much limited experience in about ancient scripts and languages. Today, there are hundreds of people who have worked, and thousands of inscriptions have been documented. So our understanding of ancient scripts and languages is also much more evolved. And 3, we have actually very good technology, which helps us see much more clearly writing on even fairly eroded stones. So it helps us to kind of read more and read better what had been read 100 years ago. So that's the rereading part that I was talking about. So rereading is essentially to try and get more information than was originally gathered or presented, and to correct what's also been presented.
One more thought on the hyperlocal significance, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was a part of one of these walks that you did in Hebbal, right?
Hebbal.
And at that time, I don't know, I just said we want to go and visit some stones because we were trying to do a project where instead of people putting up a statue, I thought, why don't we put up one of these stones? And it was a placemaking exercise in the locality. I
Right.
got in touch with you and you said there's an inscription stone nearby. So we were trying to do this in Ganganagar and you said it's in Hebbal, and we went over and found that stone. And then later on I realized, you tell me the history of that stone, but for the viewers, but I just found it very interesting to discover something, and you showed me how to read those stones, and it was kind of buried, and it's after a long time that I realized I was a part of something significant. And what it did was it made me buy into the local tale and also feel proud of what Hebbal was where I live from a long time ago, that it has a history beyond Bengaluru. And when you talk about Hebbal and Begur and all of these places, now they are definitely a part of Bengaluru. And the cities in those days were probably just Pete area and a few kilometers around it. And if it wasn't for cantonment, it might have stayed there. But what is the city now, or what is a town today, might become Greater Bengaluru tomorrow. So the Dodbalapur inscription stone might talk of Dodbalapur, and tomorrow Dodbalapur might be a part of Bengaluru. You'll never know. What is so the significance of these local stones are, and the storytelling for local? What do you feel like? I feel very proud that I have something in my neighborhood that I can relate to beyond just some Bengaluru, which is 40 kilometers away, right? I might not. Well, okay, Begur is also nice that we have that in
Right.
the part of Bengaluru, but Hebbal is more closer. I like it better. Tell
Right.
me the story of that Kittayya. How did you end up finding that, and what significance does it hold for the larger story that you're trying to tell?
Absolutely right, and you hit it on the head when you said people like to know what's the immediate story. What's the where are my own parents, my own family, my own village, my own this one is what I associate most with, right? And in your case, you're absolutely right. You kind of connect closer with Hebbal. Now, if you think about Hebbal, what comes to your mind, or most people's mind, when you mention Hebbal, is that traffic jam on Hebbal flyover, right? It's a name, or it's a place that kind of scares people, right? But that's one part of the story. The thing is that Hebbal, in Hebbal, we have a lot of things. But the other interesting thing is when you're going up the flyover, you see the lake there.
Yeah.
Right. And again, it's not a site that excites a lot of people. Firstly, you're sitting in a jam, and you see a lot of space there. So you're not really, why don't you build a broader road? Why don't you do build some houses there, and all of those things are probably the average thought that runs in most people's minds. Okay. But when you look, but Hebbal is a fairly old place, ancient place with very interesting events that have unfolded there. Okay. The first of which is in Hebbal around 2017, and I think actually when I took you there, we saw a bunch of inscriptions lying in a ditch. They were in a ditch, right? At that point in time, we were not aware. We were actually looking at a 16th century inscription at that time. And the reason I was showing you that was because it had the name of Hebbal on it, one, and it also referred to the lake of Hebbal there. And it said as the Hiriya Kere, or the bigger lake of Hebbal. Lake. Okay, so there were two things there that directly connected with Hebbal. One is the antiquity of the place. We said it's 16th century. And the second was the mention of the lake in the this one. So therefore, both Hebbal village or the place and the lake were at least as old as from the 16th century. And when we saw that, we were actually looking down at something At that time, none of us, and I think there were about 4 or 5 of us at that time,
Yeah.
looking down at the stone, realized that there was something buried in the ground or half buried in the ground at that time, which actually was from the 8th century, and which also mentioned the name Hebbal in it. Okay,
Mm.
so there was a sculpture. This was one of the 4 stones actually had a sculpture of it with a person appearing to be in a kind of combat scene. You could see a person holding a bow, and he seemed to be fighting with someone else there. But since it was in a ditch and it was a small ditch, none of us actually could get a clear idea of what it was. Right.
Right.
So what happened in 2017 June actually was, or rather, around that time was, this ditch was the only one in that place which had not been white topped yet. The rest of the road and rest of the pavement area, all of that had been concreted. This one was something the Hebbal, people of Hebbal worshipped, and they worshipped only once a year on the day of Sankranti in January. Okay, since it is worshipped, they had the belief that that stone should not be disturbed. It's been in that place for ages, so let it remain there, and therefore the ditch had not been covered up. Okay, but typically during election times, our officials and our politicians wake up, right? And at that time, one of those local officials or politicians, whoever it was, had the bright idea to fill up that ditch with concrete as well. Okay, this is after we had visited the place. And in the meantime, I had been there a few times, and I asked the people in and around if we can lift that stone up and put it up in a small pedestal, or at least at road level, so that it was not in a ditch where a lot of garbage and rubbish would gather. They had refused to do that. They'd actually said since it's something they worship, and there's a belief that they should not touch it and that they should not disturb that stone. They said let it remain there. It's not bothering anybody. We don't want to lift it up and do whatever you're saying and all that. Let it be. Basically, because in the world of inscriptions, a 16th century inscription is not something which is very old. In and around the place, adjacent locality of Jakkur had something from the 10th century. Across the road in Kodiyalli, we had something from the 14th century. So all in and around Hebbal were a lot of inscriptions, also in a similar situation, either in ditches or in by the roadside on a footpath, all kinds of places which are insecure and can essentially not places of where an inscription should be. So, and this was, while it was indignified sitting in a ditch, it wasn't unsafe. It was a safe place, and people did take care of it. They wouldn't allow anyone to destroy it or whatever. But when this idea of filling up the ditch with concrete was there, they didn't object, because there would still be the tip of the stone, above the road level, which they were happy to worship with. But what happened at that time is one of the local boys who was aware of a lot of these things reached out to some other friends and said, look, in the meantime, gravel had been filled in the ditch as well. They filled it with gravel, but they were only waiting to top it with concrete. So at that time, one of these local boys reached out to some folks in JP Nagar and said, look, my people are going to be wasting this. Can you all come and help us, please? So these boys rushed over from JP Nagar. They were part of a group called, they were a small, young, enthusiastic group of heritage conservationists called Revival Heritage Hub. So they rushed over to Hebbal, and they kind of managed to convince the people that, look, it's not good to destroy this. Let's protect it. So they themselves actually extracted the stone from the ditch and lifted it out. When they lifted it out, they saw writing below it on the portions that had been that had been buried in earth. Yeah. And that essentially had the place name Hebbal in it. And that writing also carried the name of the person who died, or that stone was put up for. It was a hero stone, or it was a memorial stone for a person by name Kittayya, who died in a battle or an attack on his town by the Rashtrakutas. It actually names the Rashtrakutas there, the Ratavadis it's called as. So they come with the intention of destroying the place. It is a OoruLabs. They use the name, to destroy entirely the place of Hebbal. So it was put up in his honor there. So we had 2-3 things there. And interestingly, what happened was that this is also the oldest writing we have in the city, found so far in the city. And it was dated to about 750 C of the Common Era. Okay. So many important points came out from about 5 lines of writing on that stone. One of which was, this is the oldest writing in the city. Okay. Second was the place name at that time. It was called Perbolal. Perbolal essentially means is in Haleganada Peri Volal. Peri is big, Volal is town. Okay, so Peri Volal is Perbolal. So Hebbal, what we think of as a small place, was actually a big town. It was called a big town in 750 CE. And more importantly, it was called as the entire administrative division, which is like what we call as a ward today, or a constituency there. By the way, Hebbal is still a ward, right? So and this heritage of being an administrative division goes back to 750 CE, at which time it was called Perbolal Nadu. Nadu is the administrative division, right? So it was a big significant place at that point in time, and there was an attack to destroy that place, to raise it to the ground. OoruLabs means completely remove the place from existence itself. So, but that attack was fended off by this guy, by this person called Kittayya, and he died. So if it were not for Kittayya, Hebbal would not have existed today. Most likely, it would not have existed today. Okay, so if you're a resident of Hebbal, you owe it to this man. Your existence in Hebbal today is thanks to this man Kittayya. Number one. Okay, and number two, since it's the oldest writing in the city, so think about it this way: what is Bangalore famous for? It's not famous. It's not a religious place. It's not it's not some place where we make jewelry or garments or anything like that. This is essentially a place well known across the world, especially today, for its literate citizens or educated citizens. It doesn't matter if you are a software engineer or whether you are an aircraft engineer or you're a doctor or you're a lawyer or whatever. Fundamentally, you are all of that because you are educated, right? So this is the first sign of literacy in the city of Bangalore. So the Hebbal Kittayya Hero Stone is the first sign that there were literate people living in this region. They were educated, or there were people who were able to read and write in this region. And it was sitting in a ditch. Yeah, it was sitting in a ditch which was usually filled with filth and garbage, and very common to find pawn stains or on that as well. So okay, that's how much we were treating our this one heritage there. Okay, so Perbolal, how did Perbolal end up with Hebbal? Okay, over a period of time, in many hundred years, the pa changed to a ha. And we have the examples of that so Tamil, Kannada, Telugu are all related languages, right? So some of these native forms are still retained in some language or the other. So if you see Telugu and Tamil today, I'll give a couple of examples. In Kannada, we have halu, but it is palu in Tamil. So the original form of a pa is retained in Tamil there. Puli, huli, for a tiger. So, but in Kannada, what happened is around the 10, 11, 12, 13th century, when the initial character was a pa, it changed to a ha. So that's how Palu became. It used to be Palu in around 700, but slowly it became Halu and became Puli and it became Huli and things like that as well. Okay, that's how Peri became. That's one pa became ha. The second was the change of Ra to Ba. Typically, again, when around the same time frame, in the middle of a word or a term, when there was in other places as well, a va changed to ba in Kannada. Examples of that are again finger. The word for finger in Kannada is beralu. In Tamil is beral. So the va became a ba. So similar transformations have happened. So perbolal over time changed from perbolal to perbolal to pebbol to hebbol to hebbal. So over 1300 years, the two letters that changed pa, ha, and va, and the Ba to this one, the Ra to Ba, or the Va to Ba became Hebbal. So essentially, thanks to that one stone, and again, all of these are in different inscriptions. We find different usages of these, how it changed and all that. So the place name we understand now to be being a big town. The place, it's the home to the oldest writing in the city, and since it carries the name of people in it, Kittayya is the earliest known person to have lived in the vicinity in Bangalore town today by name. We know other people lived before him and all of that, but we don't know their names. So for that reason, I like to call him as the first citizen of Bengaluru.
Very nice.
So if you had to build a voter list, let's say, by any measure, he would be the voter ID number one because he's the only name we know there. And again, the vintage of that locality, that it's from 750 CE is something that we learn. And let's assume now that you are from Hebbal, now how do you feel about the place now that you learned that, all of this thing? The place where this is actually is in the heart of Hebbal. This is the old Hebbal village. It's at the entrance of the village. Suddenly, the pride and sense of belonging you have to Hebbal is something totally different. Okay, you feel good about your place. You feel there's something significant that's transpired in your place. Okay, it's a place with a lot of history as well. You begin to care for Hebbal now. You own up to Hebbal. It's not a place, you just call home for a short time and move on or something like that. You now want to see a good Hebbal. That's why I think it's very important to understand this local history. Subsequently, when we narrated all of this, and then we said, look, this is a ditch is not a place for something as important as this. We said, let's put it on something which is so attractive and so impressive that this stone that stayed there for 1300 years will continue to stay there for another 1300 years. So what we did was we said, let's go crowdfund this, whatever you want to call it, structure. And then we thought we'll build a mantapa, which is in the same architectural style as was prevalent in the 8th century in this region. And that is called as the Ganga style of architecture. So a mantapa in the same architectural style as what was prevalent during Kittayya's time has been built there, and it's crowdfunded. We raised the funds through a memento. We gave a memento for people to this one. Remember the story. About 800 of those mementos were given away to people across every nook and corner of Bangalore, India, and the world. So that memento is sitting not just in various localities of Bangalore today. It's sitting in Hyderabad, Chennai, Pune, Delhi, wherever Bangaloreans have gone to. And it's also reached places like London, Berlin, Tokyo, Melbourne, New York, New Jersey, all kinds of places where again Bangaloreans have gone. They're sitting very proudly on on the desks, bookshelves, puja rooms, bank lockers included, of people who connect with Hebbal. So not only has a monument come up in that place, it's a beautiful structure come up in exactly the same location. Now replicas of that, mementos of that have reached across the world.
I am the lucky beneficiary of two of them, which is sitting right there. I'm going to put a picture of that. And there's another one in my living room. And that's because the first one I contributed to the fund and got one from you personally. And the second one was given to me as a part of the Namma Bengaluru Foundation awards. That when you received the award for doing this work, the memento was given out to people who were runners-up. That's the certificate that we registered.
That's right.
So I was the also ran who got that. So I have two of them, and it's so significant that when the relief riders was on during the pandemic, when we were going around on a bicycle and giving out, two of my routes went past towards that side on the Atinagar side, and every time I went there I made a pit stop here, and I will put up a picture of me with my bicycle doing relief rides in front of Kittayya's Mantapa, after it was built. But now I want to come to the personal journey before we come back to the lessons from all this and putting it all together. What made you interested in getting into this? You're not a historian by profession. How did your thing start into these kind of initiatives? And why did you get so interested in inscription stone?
Essentially, I have been a very rooted Bangalorean. I'm in the same place where I've been there since birth. So only the house around me has changed, but the location is essentially the same. This is now called Rajajnagar. Close by is a place, was a village called Ketmarnahalli.
Hmm. I remember that.
Ketmarnahalli is actually the village around which the layout, the Rajajnagar has been designed. So all of Ketmarnahalli lands are essentially Rajajnagar first block, second block, fifth block, sixth block, and all of that. And there's a story for every locality in Bangalore.
Yeah.
So you come from Indiranagar, it's the same story. If you come from Indiranagar is designed around the village of Binamangla. If you come from the area of JP Nagar, it's designed around Saraki. Okay, so similarly, every nagar or whatever layout or whatever you see is essentially rooted in a village in the park, in that region. Sometime in 2017, I heard that there was an inscription in Ketmarnahalli, which is from the 1300s, and apparently mentioned the name Ketmarnahalli in it. This is a place which is extremely familiar to me, because when you had to go to college or school or watch a movie or play or whatever, you had to go via Ketmarnahalli only. And it was very surprising. And Ketmarnahalli is much like what you spoke about Hebbal there, just a small 2-lane village. Today, most people, today it's kind of improved a little bit, but those days it was more like a low-income locality. It was not very tiled houses and not very clean, and there was not so much of the upcoming localities were the first blocks, second blocks, and all that. Ketmarnahalli in that was essentially the village of the low income locality, but still that was something that you kind of attached yourself closely with. Then when I learned that place was actually going back 600-700 years, that was a bit of a surprise. It was quite a surprise for me, and I said, come on, let's go on. I definitely need to learn a little bit more about this. And then I discovered this thing called inscription stones.
Mm-hmm.
And then I discovered a book called the Epigraphia Carnatica, in which all of these inscription stones have been recorded. And this book was published in 1905, more than 100 years ago. But it seems to be Bangalore's best kept secret. No historian worth his salt will talk about it. It's not spoken in schools and colleges as a part of history. Neither does, I would say, even, serious historians, neither do serious historians study that. That's really the story of the city, because as narrated by people who have lived here for hundreds of thousands of years, right? So when I went around looking for that inscription, and then found that the area is completely built over and the stone is not traceable. I live in Rajajnagar, but my workplace at that time was at the other end of the city beyond Marathalli. So I used to cycle every day up and down to my work there. And as I saw in this book, there was an inscription in Yeshwanthpur, there's an inscription in Malaysia, there's an inscription in Peenya, there's an inscription in Lageri, there's an inscription everywhere around my home. And inscriptions at the other end of the city as well, in Dodnekundi, in Marathalli, in Panatur, in all those regions there. So every day I used to kind of take a small detour and then go check up on the stone. The book will say, near this temple there, or under a people tree there, or by the lake Band, somewhere like that. It'll give some references which are 100-year-old. So you go there and then you look up and see if there is a inscription there. And about 30-40% of the time it was not traceable. And about the rest of the 60% of the time, it is sitting in absolutely pathetic surroundings. Like I narrated for Hebbal, a 1300-year-old inscription stone with the name Hebbal, with put up in memory of a person who died for the place, is sitting in a garbage dump.
They don't know
similar
that.
Stories everywhere, whether it's Dodnekundi or Vibhutipura or Marathalli or Panatur or all of those places, or here for that matter, Yeshwanthpur or Lageri or any. So it kind of said, look, this is sad. We have to do something about these and make sure that one, they get more dignified homes. They don't sit in those ugly places. They kind of sit at least on some pedestal with some board and local people and aware of what is there. And two, we kind of secure it so that this destruction is stopped. Most of the 30-40% of these stones have disappeared in the last 20 years, 30 years. Ever since Bangalore started, this kind of explosive growth. When you go to a place, they will actually tell you, sir, there was a stone here until 1980, 1990. When this road was built or when this building came up, they actually broke the stone and used it for as construction material. We did not know what was in it. Yeah. So there are all these kind of stories, and then and essentially they are telling you this, like, let's say, for example, the Dodnekundi stone. It was sitting at the edge of a busy intersection, open to traffic, and it's kind of a place where it's very, very highly probable that a bus or a lorry or a car is going to go straight and ram into that stone. It has the name of the place, Nekundi. Okay, it mentions a lake there. It mentions all of that, and it mentions that the farmers of the place gave away land to the Shivganga temple. It does there's so much information about it. When you tell that to a resident of Dodnekundi there and say, do you realize the stone has this kind of an incredible story about your place? They all found, they're all kind of so enthused and they say, let's do something, let's save it or do whatever and all that. So that started this in the journey of inscription stones and saving them. And then coming from a tech background, it was evident that even if we protect these stones by putting them in a nice, secure place, the weather, the environment itself is going to take a toll on that. These stones are flaking. They're exposed to sunlight, they're exposed to the atmospheric corrosion or whatever it is, and rain and all of that. So slowly over hundreds of years, the surface of the stone flakes away and the writing goes away. So the idea was to kind of try and see if we can find a better way of making models, digital models of these. First we save it physically, and then we kind of build digital copies of these. So we went through many methods and techniques. We said, look, can we try this to build a digital model, etc., and all that. And then finally we boiled it down to one method which worked very well, which is a commercial handheld scanner, which normally is used in automotive and defense applications for copying parts and things like that. So it's now it's now becoming more commonplace, but essentially that's where it started. So then we started as a hobby, started building digital models. We used to kind of get the services of that company to do it. On weekends, when we have the time, we would take them around to those inscriptions. They would scan it and we'd build digital models and give us. Then over time, that became quite well known that there's a bunch of people who are going around doing this. Then this institution called the Mythic Society, which is a 100-year-old institution in the area of working in the area of history, archaeology, folklore, numismatics, and all of that. So they called me there for a talk to show and explain what it is that we were doing in terms of this technology. What is all this scanning business about? What is all this modeling and all that? So there was a hall full. There is a beautiful hall called the Daly Hall on Ruputunga Road. So the hall was full of historians and archaeologists and all of them. And we demonstrated the work we do. We actually carried a replica of an inscription stone. We took the scanner, the computers, and all that. We scanned it and then we showed it to the entire audience and said, look, this is what we can do. One, it will help us from a preservation perspective. Two, it will help us from a rereading perspective, correcting mistakes or filling the blanks and all of that. And the Mythic Society said, how much will it cost if we do this as a regular project? This is a good thing that you guys are doing, but it needs to scale up. What would it take to do this across the district? So we made a proposal and said, look, this is the cost and this is what would be involved, what it take to do the project in terms of preserving all the inscriptions, 1,500 inscriptions in and around Bangalore. So they were happy with it and they said, we'll fund it if you're running it. So it ran into the cost for that came at that time to about 3 crores, and they didn't bat an eyelid and they said it's worth it. We see value. Let's do this.
Mm.
So for me at that time, also I'd seen a lot of corporate life, and I thought, look, the only thing I haven't done enough of is to give back to my city, which is giving me all these great things that I'm enjoying in life. Uh, and then but I said, look, great, I will do this. We'll take this up as a 3-year project. We'll build a team of historians or PhDs and people like that. We'll go around place to place. We work in 3 districts. That's Bangalore urban, Bangalore rural, and Ramnagara districts. This is the erstwhile Bangalore district, the undivided Bangalore district. There's about 1,500 inscriptions there. So we go every village, every town, everywhere it's there, documented or undocumented. We go and ask people. We scour the neighborhoods there, and then we not only physically conserve those inscriptions, we also build digital models of those, and we read them and then we publish them. So this is one way of ensuring that the heritage is conserved and saved. Number 2, we also reach the message across to people everywhere that there is this incredible history to wherever you are born and wherever you live today.
How do you then talk about this locally? Because you were able to tell this Hebbal story. How do you tell the Ketmarnali story? How do you tell the
Right.
Nakshetali story? Because all of these, like you said, Sanjay Nagar is Nakshetali. I still remember BTS buses going to Ketmarnali at one point in time. I have seen that name. I've heard that name. So they don't exist anymore. They are overwritten by the new names. What does it mean? So what does it take to tell these stories, and how do you tell these stories? What are your I remember the map you once shared with me,
Right.
and I have half a mind to call this podcast Cyclists Save Bengaluru. How do you think we can tell this story? One, put up the map, encourage people to visit, right? That's one. How are we telling this? How are you planning to tell these stories? What can people do to tell these stories?
So, Satya, we do a lot of things to make sure there's increased our awareness. The first of the things that we do is we do a lot of local events at the site of the inscription stone, and you have attended one of those, and that's what you were referring to before. Essentially, these are like simple narrations in ordinary language, in ways that people can directly connect to. Those people can directly connect to. For example, let's say we're doing an event in Hebbal, and then we have the people of Hebbal in and around there. Okay. So the story is that we tell them, do you realize your place, Hebbal, that the place where we are standing right now, it's been around for 1,300 years, and even 1,300 years ago, it was a big place. That's the name of the place itself. And that lake that we could see from here earlier, and that lake has been the life source for 1,300 years, or it's like about 35, 40 generations of people have lived off the water of that lake. Your father's father's father, or your mother's 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 mother, going back 35 generations, have essentially been around thanks to the lake, the water in the lake. The lake's been the water that has been used for cooking, for washing, for farming, for everything else. And if we don't own up to this lake and maintain this lake, I think who else will? And this is the one thing that's been we are around here today thanks to. This man Kittayya is the man who is the most important person for us on earth here today. We have all gathered here thanks to Kittayya. And this place Hebbal exists today thanks to Kittayya. And we are around here because of this lake around here. Now, what are we doing about this lake, this beautiful place Hebbal itself? Okay, do we associate with this? In what ways do we associate with this? Do we care about the place in terms of its cleanliness, in terms of its lawfulness, in terms of everything that you can think of? It's our place. Okay, and if we don't think of it as our place, we don't own up to this place. Okay. Net effect of these kind of local connections or local narrations is that you suddenly find an immense amount of pride, and this pride is founded. It's factual. No, it's not cooked up. It's not imaginary. Blah blah blah. All of that. And then we say, do you understand that the oldest writing in the city of Bangalore, the great global capital Bangalore, is sitting here in front of you? How about bringing your children and running their fingers on these writings here and explaining to them that the language they speak, the language they write, is that old? and the evidence of that language is right in front of them. Your understanding of your place, your understanding of your language, your understanding of your culture, your inheritances, all of that dramatically change when this happens. Okay, so that's one way we kind of build awareness. And two is that we write. We write a lot. We interact a lot with we write, and a lot of people write for us as well. Media, we actually do seek out the media. We like to get the media to narrate the stories. Cover Hebbal Kittayya, cover Kodibe Kodiyalli, cover the Saraki, cover every Dumlur, anything that you can think about. And the reach of the media is humongous, especially regional media. If it's in a Kannada Prabha or a Prajavani or let's say in a Deccan Herald or Indian Express or all of them, the reach is humongous. And that's one media. That's the local media. And then we also work with magazines and journals like Frontline and all of them, who also give us a lot of space. We get coverage like that. We work with the international media as well. Then we have our own publications too. We have a series called the Bangalore TH-S1E21. All our own publications are, by the way, copyright free and freely downloadable from the internet. Okay, they're all shared in archive.org. We have a book series called the Bangalore TH-S1E21. It's in Kannada and one or two are in English as well, where we go locality by locality. So far, we have done 2 localities, the Jakkur region and then the Singapura region, which is the Vidyaranyapura region. And then we narrate the story of those localities based on inscriptions, based on temples, on hero stones, on sculptures, on whatever other information we have there. We do write the story of that locality comprehensively, whether it's colonial history or 16th century history, we do write about that too. But we also talk a lot more about the pre-16th century history of places, which is lesser known, right? And that's something we do. And then we also do a lot of academic events for schools and colleges, especially, again, local schools and colleges. For example, we go to the Yelahanka region and then we go to the government college in Yelahanka, the history students there, we take the faculty there, we take them to inscriptions or sites there. We do a lot of classes, whether it's Malleshwaram or Jakkur or Begur or wherever, schools, colleges, especially teachers. Then we do language courses. A lot of the problems with inscription stones is that it's hard to read script. So people have begun to think that it's unreadable. And in fact, there's a lot of superstition associated that it should not even be read. That reading it will bring misfortune and all of this kind of stuff. So what we do is that we take children, especially primary school children, and then we try to have them read 10th century, 8th century Kannada letters there. And that's mind-boggling for them. So when a child, which is in, say, the 5th standard or 6th standard, studying Kannada, goes to a site and then sees 1300, 1200-year-old Kannada written somewhere, and then kind of deciphers that, the child has an amazing experience as well as the teachers. Usually the teachers are wide-eyed mouth. Okay, they're looking, how can this child that I'm teaching read this kind of stuff and all that. So we create that, one is curiosity in the children to learn about their own heritage, local heritage. So that's the education angle. We take children's school teachers and college children and teachers like that as well. We work a lot more with colleges as well. So we kind of conduct events, special events for them. Aspects of history that are not a part of the curriculum. Like say MES College right now is actually having its bachelor students go to 15 inscription sites in Bangalore and make videos. And that's a 15-mark assignment for them of a 50-mark subject. Yeah, of a 15-mark subject. So, and they have to write an essay as well. So they go to those sites, and whatever they understand, of the heritage of the place, they interact with the local people and all of that. So we do a lot of events, and again, things like podcasts, like I'm talking to you today. We interact with podcasters, we interact with video bloggers, and all of those kind of things. All said and done, it's still a drop in the ocean. Yep. So this city, which has a 1.25 crore population, needs I think involvement at extraordinary higher levels to get the message across to a significant amount of the people in the city today. It's still a minuscule, this one. And the work we do has to scale up significantly.
Fair enough. I want to bring this together with 2 things. One is to when you scale, one is to scale to the city, then you're scaling to the neighboring districts. And then there's the need to scale this across India as well. Is that there is
Yeah.
history similar in things everywhere, and how do we address that? But before we get there, today we are living in this contemporary world. We go about our daily lives. This is a very cosmopolitan city with people from everywhere coming in, and that's what has made it this big city with so many variety and talent, and everybody who comes here. You have said before, the city has given a lot to many people. You got talent, you got literacy, or whatever you want to call it, right? You got good intelligent people coming here and doing their work and living their lives. How should one look at all the things you have learned from discovering these inscription stones? How do we put it together? What does it mean for the citizens of this city today, and how they see the city and how they interact with it, and how they look at the future of the city? And like you said, very interestingly, just to go back to that micro level, one of the lessons beyond the citizens is also that the public administrators and the society around that place can start to look at developing the area, trying to preserve some of these things going forward. But if they didn't know, it would be like that stone in the dirt. It might just be cut up and used for construction,
Right.
right? The lake tomorrow might be cut up and used for something else.
Right.
It is possible to include these elements in the future, build narratives around that so you can string that story. And how that's part of the answer, but I would like you to elaborate on how contemporary people should view this, living in the city, doing their daily lives, having a lot of problems on their head. How should they view this? How do they interact with
Right.
this?
Lots of things there, Satya. The first of which is, the city of Bangalore is not now, for 1,000 years. It's been a very different kind of place for a lot of people. In the sense, if people are flocking to Bangalore from across India or across the world today, they're doing it for lots of reasons. If you ask, why are you in Bangalore to a migrant? They would say, one, the common answer would be weather. Obviously, we like the weather. And then they will say the people. People are very welcoming. They're very supportive. And again, this is a place where it's multilingual. You can speak natively. People here speak 4-5 languages. Okay, that essentially makes it a very that's the multilingual cosmopolitan part of the story. And when people are multilingual, they're more open-minded. They're very welcoming. Okay, all of that automatically kinds of flows in. And all of this is actually rooted in the past. Okay, the region of Bangalore has been multilingual for 1,000 years or more. I mean, today we kind of carved out the region into linguistic states and all of that. But essentially, that's an artificial division.
Yeah.
Nothing in nature has sharp boundaries like that. Moment I cross Atibale, it can't become Tamil only, and when I come inside, it's Telugu here, or Kannada here, or any of those kind of things. So the region is multilingual, and that's kind of built a certain temperament in people already. All of that is there, and so what is happening today is there is a massive, in the pace at which the city is growing, and at the pace at which people are coming in here and making it their own. They hardly have time to fit in. They hardly have time to learn and kind of become an integral part of Bangalore city. So a lot of people fundamentally are living here physically, but mentally they are probably somewhere else. The net effect of that is essentially, when you don't own up to a place, you give up on the place, you don't participate in it. And when you don't participate in it, essentially it goes to the dogs. Okay, governance takes a hit, everything takes a hit. If I don't own up and ask, look, why is my road in such a bad state? Or why is it such a dump here? Why is traffic such a mess here? Why is, so many other things? Why are my lakes getting so horribly polluted? All of those questions come when I start thinking of it as mine. Okay. When I start thinking of it as, look, I'm here, traffic in Bangalore is bad. Okay. The power supply here is terrible. It's a filthy city, blah blah. All of these kind of things. When I'm pointing fingers at someone else, and I'm not taking ownership on that. And when will that happen? When does when somebody throws garbage at my house, I go all out and then kind of clear it up and make sure it never happens, right? Because that's my house. I feel like it's mine. It needs to be kept clean. It is got there's a decorum around the place and all of that. But if I step outside my house and then I say I'm stepping out into a world that is not mine, that world will go to rot. And that will happen when I stop thinking that it's not mine. You will start thinking it is your mine when you understand that, this is the extraordinary place I am in today. I've settled in here. I got a life to lead. My kids are born and brought up here. Whatever it is, all of that is here. And when that happens automatically, and I'll give an example. Okay, go back to that Hebbal, the incident itself. When we were giving this story, when we're telling the story of Kittayya and Hebbal and all of that, in one of those events, a lady who was pregnant and expecting to deliver a child in a few weeks or months, she's a native by Hebbal. This one actually lives within sight of that hero stone. She said, "Sir, I didn't know this at all. We've been seeing this all my life here. But now that I understand that my village Hebbal is so old and this and that and all of that, I'm going to add Hebbal to the name of the child that I'm going to be giving birth to soon. Whether it's a girl or a boy, I don't know. I'm going to include Hebbal in that name. In our family, it's not the custom to include a place name in the names, but I'm going to do this here." And that boy subsequently is now is Rohit Hebbal Shetty. He has the name Hebbal in that. Okay, and so the pride at which the boy, and like all mothers or all parents, she's going to be telling him repeatedly, why the Hebbal name is there in his name but not in the parents' name or the grandparents' name or anything like that. And that boy for sure is going to have an enormous sense of belonging and pride to Hebbal. Even if he's not in Hebbal all his life, he's going to say, "I am from Hebbal and Hebbal's got the story, and I definitely will care about Hebbal. I'll own up to the schools in Hebbal. I'll own up to the place development in and around Hebbal. I have to do something about the governance of the infrastructure in Hebbal." All of this will automatically set in, and the place entirely becomes a better place because of sheer participation and involvement and engagement. Okay, so this is what I would say. Cosmopolitanism is extremely important. We kind of tend to think that cosmopolitanism means automatically you don't own to anything. Absolutely wrong. It's the opposite of that. You own up to a lot more when you are cosmopolitan. And this is essentially the reason. And again, when you start taking pride in your place, you start taking pride in the work coming out of that place, in everything happening in that place. Now, subsequently, in the last 25, 30 years, actually, Bangalore has evolved to a point where nearly everything that we use and see around us, whether it's Indian made or whether it's international or a foreign brand, has a huge Bangalore contribution to it. Okay, the who's who of the world work out from Bangalore here. Recently, recently I saw an article which said the Honeywell avionics division here is a huge contributor to the avionics business of Honeywell worldwide. Similarly, there was a statement from GE aircraft engines. The new aircraft engines that are going to be powering the 300 odd aircraft that that are going to come into India or across the world. The next generation aircraft are all powered by engines which have a significant Bangalorean contribution in that. The Samsung phones that we use have a significant contribution to that. The Google, the famous Google search and everything else has a Bangalore contribution to that. Anything that we use today, whether it's Intel or Apple or tech or non-tech or everything you can think of as a Bangalore contribution to that. We are making products for the world. We are making future products for the world. What are we making our city into? While we're doing those extraordinary things for everybody in the world, what are we doing for our own city? The same people who are working to build all these world-class products, most of them don't own up to the city. Why? Because they don't know the city. Because they don't understand the city or the place they come from. Let's say, for example, that I would say, like we go to Airbus, the Airbus or Shell or whichever of these, offices, mega offices that are there, and then tell, do you realize this place that you are located in today? Let's say it's Bayapnalli, or it could be Whitefield, or it could be some other location, has got this incredible 1,000-year history. It'd be out there on the notice boards, on the welcoming boards, on their websites, on their everything that you can think of. Every employee induction letter that goes out there would say about us, would include a section on where they are, the history of that place. Okay, and the moment you make that connection and understand and say, look, my workplace or my residential place has got such incredible past, you automatically associate yourself with that. This is my place. Vibhutipura is my place, Marathalli is my place, Kundanhalli is my place, or Pinya is my place, or everything else in that. And instantly you're going to approach problems differently. You're not going to be that finger pointer saying, he didn't do his job. This place is a lousy place. It's not. It's not going to be that place. It's not going to be this place. It's going to be my place. It's going to be much harder to say my place is a lousy place. I think this is extremely wide. By the way, the story that we have is probably the only city in the world where we can tell such a story.
Really? Why so?
Yeah, why so? Because which are the other modern capitals that we have in the world today? Let's say Silicon Valley. Where does I can't go around Silicon Valley village by village, town by town, county by county like this and narrate 1,500-year stories. It isn't there.
Those are
It
the
just
gold
isn't
rush.
there.
Yeah.
It isn't just
after the
there.
gold
You can
rush.
stop at 100 years. You can stop at 150 years. Okay. Where else can you go? You can go to all the happening places in the world. So which are the vintage or the heritage or the ancient places in the world typically top of mind recall? Rome, Cairo,
Rome,
all of that.
Persia. Yeah.
Yeah, those are tourist places. Those are not happening places like the world, like Bangalore is. By the way, while it's a double-edged sword, this is the fastest growing city in the world today, which means it's the most happening place in the world today. And it's got such an incredible history or heritage to go along with it. This combination is extremely hard to come by. And today we are wasting it away.
I think we are.
Yeah.
It came from one of the ex-chief secretaries who was, I don't want to name him, but he was there. He told me once, why don't you create something for... See, it's a predominantly business town, Bengaluru is. A lot of people come in here, they just do their business and go away. There's not much of a... You go around Vidhan Saudha a little bit and then you see Kaban Park and Lal Bagh and then you head out, right? Maximum Tipu Sultan. How do you engage a lot of people who are coming in to give them an excuse? There are some walks cropping up now with contemporary heritage. I mean, I don't call it, there is no contemporary heritage. I would say some amount of heritage that people have been able to do walks around. And this, I think, is a powerful way of the narrative. What it does, if I can summarize, is you take people away from transactional involvement with the city and give them insights into what else could be and spin a narrative that can make the storytelling happen better, because there is a lot of accomplishments. Like you said, Bengaluru is one of the top 5 innovation hubs in the world, top 10, whatever. There can be a better storytelling with these kind of things, and I think including inscription stones in that narrative, I am very interested personally, and I think most people would be, if we were able to string this into a powerful narrative. What can other cities learn from this?
The problem of destruction of heritage, disowning of heritage, is happening in all urban locations in the country today. Whether it's Chennai or whether it's Hyderabad or Pune or most of the places, this is the same story. Yeah. While in Bangalore, we are kind of ahead of the curve in understanding. We discovered this thing called, this fantastic mine called Inscriptions, and we're doing something about it. It's not happening in the same pace anywhere else. When I say 30-40% of the inscriptions in a city are getting destroyed, the story is no different in all these other places. The story is exactly the same. So a movement to save them and tell the story and give a deeper narration of the history of the city is absolutely the need of the hour in every single place. Okay, if you go to Chennai and then ask them much the story, actually, when was Chennai, when was Madras founded? Actually, they celebrated Madras Founders Day and all of that. They'll give a date in 16 something. It's just ridiculous. That's ridiculous, because if the city of Madras has got prehistoric sites, much like prehistoric sites in Bangalore. We somehow seem to think that the world started after the colonial times or a few hundred years before that. And what that is doing is it's kind of putting us on a lower starting base than we have. So if we end up thinking that ours is a new city and there's lots of issues and trouble and problems that we got to bear with and put up with, we are starting at the base, which means that look, it's all right for us. So that's the story in most cities in urban locations. It's the same story in urban rural locations as well. The difference between urban and rural is changing so dramatically fast today that it's hard to differentiate and say pace of destruction or heritage destruction is only in urban, not in rural, and all of that. It's actually more or less everywhere.
Correct.
So we need such movements to start everywhere, in urban as well as rural locations. Thankfully, Bangalore has been ahead of the curve. So
Yeah.
the city of Bangalore 3 years ago was had 110 inscriptions, and we continue to have 110 today. They will
Mhm.
stay, secure for physical mode for another 100 years, and probably digitally forever. Similar efforts and initiatives need to happen elsewhere in the country too. While I'm so focused and obsessed with telling you the Bangalore story, the story is no different anywhere else.
So there is a need for people to be able to take this up in their own cities and see. There are lots of learnings with the inscription stones of Bengaluru that you can guide them on, and possibly it's a story that can be told in many other places. There's a dip rich culture. But what is the role of the government now?
The government.
Because I'll tell you the way I see it. We talked about how citizens need to care about these things and how they can form a better opinion of their hyperlocal story and how it relates to the larger city that they are in today. And the city is expanding boundaries. It could be a stopped boundary. It could be called a different city. So tomorrow Hebbal could be in a city called Bangalore North, right? When it gets divided for administrative. So political boundaries will keep getting redrawn, but where you live and where you settle will have its history and go forward. But a lot of people who are wiping over it beyond the citizens who are unaware most of the times is also the government, which plans infrastructure but plans it based on the knowledge they have today and what they deem is necessary going forward based on where they stand today. How much of this history needs to be told to them, and how do they have the capacity to include it in their plans? How much should they know to include, and what kind of capacities do they need to include in their plans before they destroy anything? As simple as going and removing the stone and throwing it by the wayside or using it for construction.
Right.
How do they need to think through?
So the legal, the organization that's actually directly responsible for all of this is the archaeology department of the state, the Karnataka Archaeological Department.
Hmm.
Okay. Now the story is that unfortunately they are one of the worst funded departments in the government today. They are barely able to pay the salaries. Actually, they pay their salaries well, but everything else, which is the upkeep of museums, monuments, etc., and all that, is not happening. The simple reason they don't have money. The story, if you walk into any museum or any monument anywhere, you'll see that it's absolutely filthy, falling apart, all of that. The reason for that is because they have hardly any money, and that's reality. If you and it's not a secret. You can open up the Karnataka state
Yeah.
budget, and you'll find that their annual budget is approximately about 7 crores or something like that. And with that, they have to maintain Hampi, they have to maintain Mysore, they have to maintain the palaces, the forts, everything. And then, which will leave you with about 1,000 rupees for an inscription or something like that. Which is asking a little too much. So the fundamental problem from a government institution in that sense is they have no money. Why is that? I think basically because the people also don't have to, people are also not demanding. When an MLA or a corporate or whoever comes up to you and asks you, what can I do for you? We are still focused on the potholes and the
Yeah.
drains and the whatever and all that. We are yet to realize that there's incredible heritage in our midst, which if the government has to own up to, they need money to do that, and we need to fix that problem. That's part of one. But having said that, the people there, and this is my own personal experience, they are incredibly supportive. And there's no secrets at all with them. The first thing they will tell you is, look, Satya, I love the idea. You are doing great work. Excellent. I'll work with you. I'll support you. But, please don't ask me to spend any money on that. I have zilch money to do that. But whatever else you need from me in terms of documentation or whatever other support that you need to come. You want me to come to the site and talk to the people. You want me to pick up the phone and talk to somebody. I'll do all of those kind of things. But you want me to erect a structure there, put up a board there, and all of that. I don't have the money for doing that. You raise the funds. I will work with you and make sure that happens. So that way they do a brilliant job. And that's the archaeology department. But the other administrative machinery of the state, most places I have interacted with are equally, I would say, reciprocative. For example, in the district of Ramnagara, the chief executive officer and the commissioner, the district commissioner, and all their teams are super enthused about all the stuff that is there. Once we took them around and we showed them this thing and said, look, this village in this panchayat, we have such incredible inscriptions and hero stones and temples and all of those kind of things. So we didn't know all this at all, but let's do something now. They're also kind of funding start, but nevertheless, but they find very innovative ways to solve this. So there's so much enthusiasm that we built a catalog, and you can share the link as well for this. A Ramnagara District Heritage Catalog of inscriptions, hero stones, and all of that. Okay, it's also on archive.org. It's about a 200-page book which gives a lot of detailed info on what is there in that district, in which place, what needs to be done. We're saying, look, it's falling apart. We need to fix this and all of that. So the district administration there is carving out some money from all these, naregas and all of those kind of things for heritage conservation. Okay, so in that case, in that situation, the problem was ignorance. They didn't know anything at all existed. But once we showed them that this is there and that there is enthusiasm to kind of for that heritage, they're willing to kind of find some money here, there, in whatever ways and means and salvage them. And today we have started to salvage this in many places in the three areas that we operate. So the government, while almost as ignorant as I would say the general public, but those officials that we have sought out support from have actually been very enthusiastic and participated. Are they going and doing it all by themselves? No, but that's okay. I don't think they have to do all of it by themselves. With citizen involvement and with citizen support, they are able to understand and they're participating, and that's really a huge deal.
I think so. I think the money problem, the way you're going about it, can be solved in the medium term to the long term.
Yeah, the inscriptions work doesn't need a lot of money. It's not hundreds of crores and all of that. So in that sense, we are also lucky to be focusing on an area where capital is not really the big issue.
Beyond documenting the inscription stones, how do you string these narratives along the silos? For example, an inscription stone is interesting to ASI at some level, directly related to the ASI. It's like saying the physics teacher will teach physics, the math teacher will teach math. But connecting a matrix to a vector between physics and math is the story, and in visualizing the cross domains. So how does the inscription stone then be taken up by the tourism department to create circuits around this? And then how do the urban planners and architects start building layouts and designing these around these stones and extending the history into the future? I'll come back to the Kittayya story. Why did we want to put up Kittayya in the placemaking? We could have put up a standard statue that we know how to, right? Some political leader, some historical figure that is in the textbook around freedom movement and things like that, right? Overkill. But this was a place in the same area, and we would much rather put up about this. So when people walk by, you mentioned something very interesting. These things were in safe places, in public places where people would see again and again, and it would create top of the mind recall, and they would remember it more, and they would try to do something around it. So the Hebbal stone would probably lead them to think about the Hebbal lake, and probably that it was a big enough town and it involved the other local areas like the Hallis around, Vishwanath Nagena Halli, Nagashetti Halli, all of these Hallis are a Kodige Halli. There were many near things. How do we break this silo narrative and build this? I mean, it's going to be a longer term initiative. Linking inscription stone to ASI is like the math teacher teaching matrix. How do we get this to be taught as a vector by the physics teacher as well? And linking those two together is how do the tourism department and the urban planning students and the architects and the urban planners and the road laying authority and the layout granting authorities, how do those people all get to start seeing local at some time in the future?
So, like you said, it's not something you can do overnight. But it's a very interesting point. And repeatedly, you and I are bringing up this example of Hebbal because, we are associated closely with this.
Yeah, we just know it.
But the story is true for every single locality of Bangalore. So I just want to leave that thing, clear. Now, take the example of this itself. One is it should become a destination point for multiple activities. What I mean by that, let me explain. Now, what's happened in some places as well is If I take the case of Hebbal, we'll go to another inscription in Hebbal, which is in Bhupsandra, closer to your house. Okay. The Bhupsandra inscription is actually on a Durga idol, okay, which is the same period as Kittayya, 750 CE. What does that mean? Just think, forget all the ASI, blah, 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 all of that angle. This is the oldest living god in the city being worshipped. Okay, we know the Alsur Someshwara, we know the Gavigangadeshwara, we know the Begur Panchalingeshwara, we know all those. In fact, we know the Mahabalipuram, we know the Kanchipuram, we know the the Udupi, the Shringeris, and all of that. Man, think about this. Walking distance from your house, where you are, my guess is it's about 100 meters at most. Is a deity who's been continually worshipped for 1300 years, which is the oldest temple in Bangalore. Now answer that question. That's the one in Bhupsandra, which is the oldest temple in South India, probably. This is amongst the oldest in South India, and there are not deities which idols which last that long. Now, if I sell the story of Bhupsandra this way and Hebbal that way, that's going to be a destination point for you. Okay, one. And two, again, within the vicinity of Bhupsandra, actually, I think it is probably even closer than your house, is UAS and GKVK. Okay, the campuses of UAS and agricultural colleges and all that. Guess what the story of that inscription and Durga is that Durga is the goddess of fertility. Okay, so when you want rain and when you want grow something well, then you worship Durga. This is the tradition and the culture of the place. It used to be sitting on Hebbal Lake Bank at one time. And then when they built the ring road, it kind of ended up in a temple, an Anjana temple inside Bhupsandra. On the inscription are names of certain people who are essentially professions for growing paddy, for watching over crops and all that. Now, what's the association with agricultural college and that? Everything that you can think of, right? They're essentially farmers, and there were people who specialized in farming. They grew only rice. They only were keeping guard over crops. Okay, so those names are inscribed on stone there. And the goddess of fertility, who is probably the goddess for all farmers even today, she's sitting there. And if I can sell Bhupsandra and that connection and that lake and all of that together, there's the educational angle to it, there's the local heritage angle to it, there is the tourism angle to it. And guess what? Let me give a slightly different perspective to that same inscription and idol there. That writing on Durga precedes the oldest literary text we have in Kannada by about 150 to 200 years.
Wow.
The oldest book in Kannada at the moment today that we know is the Kaviraja Marga, okay, which is attributed to 850-900 CE. Okay, so the author of that book was a person called Rupatunga. He wrote in the same form of Kannada characters the Kaviraja Marga as what you find written on the Bhupsandra Durga idol. You can touch this. Can you believe this? Can I do this in English? Can I go touch, say, Shakespeare's writing in hand? Or let's say go back, whatever other old English documents, testaments, etc. have. Can I go and touch it? No. But can I touch the oldest 1100-year-old Tamil here, or Kannada here, or Telugu here, or whatever? I can take my school children as a part of their Kannada classes, or Telugu classes, or Tamil classes, or whatever, and that there are hundreds of them in and around Bhupsandra and Hebbal and all that. Integrating language studies into a local heritage site, an inscription site, will not only make it an educational experience, will make it a really powerful educational experience for the children and for the thing. So it's many ways we can integrate this. How does it all happen? It takes time and it takes sustained effort at making it.
I think so.
Cycling, by the way, you and I like this thing a lot. Actually, the way I started, the Google map that you spoke about, where we have put up every single inscription in the city of Bangalore, actually the idea behind it was that we go cycling expeditions to inscription stone site every weekend, all over the city. Okay, so we say stop 1 Hebbal, stop 2 Nagavara, stop 3 somewhere else, stop 4 somewhere else, and we do a circuit of the city as a cycling tour. Yeah, that's one way to do it. By the way, it kind of ended up in a completely different way. There's an ultra marathon group in Bangalore. What these guys did is the Shivratri nights, they run all over the city all night. That's their way of doing the Jagarani there. So in 2019 or 2020, the starting point for us the Kittayya Mandapa in Hebbal. Okay, and they actually took they planned a route which went through these sites in various locations. So the the ultra marathon circuit, the cycling circuits for sports, all of them can also leverage and do the same thing.
I've published the Google Map a couple of times, but I'm going to take this offer up and see if we can organize a not a ride and make it frequent enough that we can start putting a cycle tour together along the inscription stores. I think that would be very useful. On that note, I have a completely changed perspective on how I view history one more time and how I can think about it into the future. I hope the viewers also have got a good idea of why these are important and how these can be woven into the narrative of the future of the city, and how people can participate, use history as a nice lever to understand the neighborhood. In short, I mean, you could always understand the neighborhood through the eateries. You could always understand the neighborhood through contemporary stuff like movies and malls that are there. But here is something that defines where you live. It has probably changed quite a bit, but it is possible, if we put in the right effort over the medium to long term, that we can include and string this without wiping it and starting another clean state which has no relation
True.
to what happened before. That, I think, is what I want people to take away from this. Is this is possibly one of the few. Food could be another, culture and language, it all has these things, and this is physically available for people to leverage off of. And thank you for highlighting this and showing us the possibilities, and thank you for coming on the show. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind people to like, subscribe and share these videos, and see you all next week. Thank you there.
Thank you so much, Satya. It was a wonderful discussion.